think we've been led down the wrong path, not by us, but by academics who have proposed things to us and shown us models of long-term athlete development and given us things that, told us what we should be doing when they don't even do what we do. And I want to talk about that a little bit today and propose a new way of thinking about athlete development. To me, athlete development represents anybody that is essentially before they get to college. So when people think of youth, and they say the International Youth Conditioning Association, I think sometimes people think, oh, well, you're talking about 6- and 7-year-olds. No, we're not talking about 6- and 7-year-olds. We're talking about everybody from when they were born all the way until essentially they are in college. Once they're in college, that's kind of a different way of training people. But everything below that is what we are mainly talking about. And if you've seen some of these models, I think that they have really confused us, and they've shown us things that I'm going to kind of say they don't make sense. And let's kind of look at some of these. Before we think about athlete development, we have to think about what is the goal of developing an athlete. And again, I'm sorry you guys can't see that down there right now, but there's a lot of things that go into developing an athlete and a lot of goals that they have. Are we trying to create professional athletes? Are we trying to get college scholarships? Are we trying to teach lifelong lessons? In some cases, I think the people that are involved in an athlete's life, they're in it for themselves. They want to post on Facebook that their son or daughter or the kids on their team just won a game or got a medal somewhere. Sometimes it's about enjoyment of sport. I think most of us here believe in kids enjoying sports, being healthy, being fit, learning lifelong lessons. We're not so much concerned about the fame. We're not so much concerned about creating professional athletes. But when we are developing athletes, we have to take all of those things into consideration. Because some of the kids that we train, you never know. That 8-year-old that you have in your youth program, he or she may end up in the Olympics someday. And we need to treat athletes as though we want them to be great overall athletes, well-rounded athletes that maybe someday they will compete in the Olympics, but maybe they won't. But we need to take all those things into consideration, not just the training. Athlete development is more than just strength and conditioning, sets and reps, exercise selection. It's developing the whole person. Unfortunately, we've seen models like this. Right now I'm showing long-term athlete development models, for those of you who can't see. And we see these models that have graphs and say, oh, from this age to this age there should be speed and agility, and at this age they should be doing 6 to 8 reps, and at this age they should be having this many competitions per year versus this many practices. Have you guys seen these models? There is absolutely no data supporting any of these things. Even Valier, who was one of the originators of this model, admitted that there's no supporting data. No one has gone through these models from the beginning to the end and become a successful athlete. It just hasn't happened. Why hasn't it happened? Because that is trying to develop an athlete in a petri dish. It's like they're trying to make robots. And that's not how athletes are developed. So there's a kind of a new way I think we should be thinking about. And I want to propose to you that we stop putting all these parts of athlete development in silos. So right now, we are in a silo. We are strength and conditioning. We are sports performance. But what about the coach, the sport coach? What is that person doing? What about the parents? What are they doing? How are they influencing the athlete development? And what about the athlete and what that person, that human being wants to do? And then what about all their friends around them? All those things are part of athlete development. And if all we do is think about how many sets and reps a kid should do at different stages in their life, are we really doing those kids justice? Are we really making a difference, or are we talking about it? So I'm going to propose a new way of thinking about athlete development. And this new way of thinking about it is going to include 5 different parts, 5 different principles or aspects. We'll talk about them briefly, and then I'll let you kind of think about them. The first one is ignition. The second one is coaching. Or I'm sorry, it's genetics on here. It's genetics. The third is coaching. And coaching can be how we approach an athlete, but it's also sport coaching. Because without sport coaching, there are no athletes. We have to work with the sport coaches if we want to develop athletes. It can no longer be in that silo model. There's the training. And the training, that's what we talk about mainly. And then there's opportunity. And opportunity, there's a lot of things that go into it. I'm going to go through these very quickly so that you have an understanding of them. And then we're going to talk about how this may all come together. So ignition. I took this term from Daniel Coyle's book, The Talent Code. Ignition is essentially a person's passion, motivation. What gets them excited? Why do they want to do this? What got them out of bed this morning to go work out, to go shoot baskets, to go practice their dribbling, to go work out? What is it that makes them want to do this? And somewhere along the lines in every child's life, probably before you met them, something sparked that interest. Now, I'll explain mine in a minute. But there has to be that internal motivation, that drive to succeed. That's got to be something that we acknowledge. Because without that, once that's gone, an athlete's development takes a right-hand turn and things go in the opposite direction. And I'm sure you all know athletes who have had that ignition and it changed for them. Genetics. We can't do a lot about genetics, but we can help athletes make choices about what sports maybe they get into or how they can best utilize their genetics. Opportunity. This is a huge part of athlete development that I think is missing from all these models, because opportunity includes people's parents, support around them and encouragement. A lot of times it's geography. If you want to play ice hockey and you live in the Bahamas, it might be hard to develop as an ice hockey player. But if you live in Detroit, you're in the perfect spot to be an ice hockey player. It's also going to be money. Do kids have the money to pour into not only the training, but into the travel sports? Do they have the same opportunity? And that's a big part of what happens. Social and cultural. Did anybody ever play a sport because their friends were playing that season? No. I did. That was a big part of my life. Does anybody know kids that tell you, like, well, I like my, how's the season going? It's okay, I don't really like my team this year. Because they get stuck in these travel teams that maybe they've never met anybody before, and they come together from all over the place. They don't know these kids, and sometimes it takes the enjoyment out of it. That's a part of athlete development. Because as you look at the path of that athlete, if they get in the wrong team at the wrong time and have the wrong coach, things may go in another direction. It's something that we at least need to be cognizant of. Training. The training is what we do and what we focus on. That's the physiological stuff. We understand training. We talk about training all the time. But notice this is one part of it. It's only one part of it. And then coaching. This is sport coaches. This is us, our approach to people. I think here at the IYCA, we talk about people's approach to dealing with kids quite a bit. That's a very important part of this process. Because what you say to a child may have a huge, huge impact down the road. There have been numerous studies showing that one word can change a kid's view of him or herself for years. And we sometimes have the power to send a kid in one direction or the other simply by the way they're being spoken to. But this is also about the sport coach. And like I said before, if we're not interacting with sport coaches and understanding what's going on, we may not be able to have the biggest impact possible. And having the right coach at the right time. There's an upside down model in America where every child's first experience in sports is almost always with the least qualified coach that will be in their life. If you think about how you started sports, it was as a rec t-ball player or a rec soccer or basketball player or something, and you probably had somebody's mom or dad that volunteered their time because nobody else wanted to do it. That's upside down. The best coaches should be coaching the younger athletes to develop them. You know why we all like coaching pro athletes and college athletes? Because it's easy. From, up here, it's very easy. Do we have to be technically proficient? Yes. But that's what's fun about coaching the older athletes. We no longer have to worry about how this is going to impact them throughout their lives. Now we focus on what they need today. It's a different approach. When I was a kid, can you see this tab?
I can.
When I was a kid, I went through this whole process. Magic Johnson, greatest basketball player of all time, clearly, right? Does everybody agree that he's the greatest basketball player? I'm just kidding. I don't want to get into that debate for you, LeBron and Michael Jordan fans. Magic Johnson was my hero. I grew up right there. I went to basketball games. I wanted to be Magic Johnson. I was out in the backyard or in the driveway shooting hoops. I had a Nerf hoop up with my Michigan State basketball. I wanted to be Magic Johnson. I thought for sure I was going to be a basketball player. I thought about Magic Johnson so much that I remember when I had a fever. It was a very, very high fever when I was a little kid. And I was hallucinating and I was picturing Magic Johnson's basketball up on the wall. And my dad freaked out because I was up circling it. I was like, see it right here, Dad, it's right here. And he called the doctor and said, we need to get him in. My son is seeing Magic Johnson's ball on the wall. And the doctor, to lighten things up, said, oh, which one is that, his left or his right? And it really broke things. But to this day, I remember, I can see Magic Johnson's ball up on my wall. His basketball. I can see it up there because that was a huge part of my life. Unfortunately, when I got into about middle school, 7th, 8th, 9th grade kind of time, coaches that I had, they weren't about that. They weren't about enjoying things anymore. It became really boring. It stunk. There was no more development. We were trying to win games. In middle school basketball, that's just what it was. And I started looking at, as I got older, I was looking at the coaches that were above them, and that's how they were. And that kid, who all I wanted to do was play basketball, I ended up quitting basketball. Because there was a soccer coach in my life named Tom Baloli that no one's ever heard of. But he was one of the best young athlete development coaches that I know. Because he loved it, and he made it fun. He would make jokes, but he would also develop us. And that's how the soccer coaches in my community were acting. So I didn't love soccer, but I loved the feeling. And then when I got into high school, my soccer coach, this is back in the 80s, our soccer coach was a medical doctor, and he was doing things called plyometrics, which for those of you who weren't playing sports in the 80s, nobody was doing plyometrics in high school in the 80s, and this guy was. And I got fascinated by that. And I ended up liking the training process more than I liked even the sport, because I loved basketball, not soccer. But I loved this training process. So I got into the running and the conditioning and the plyometrics and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what started me down this path. But when we look at athletes, we need to look at the complete athlete. And up here you can see, this is something that I think coaches need to understand. And what it is, it's a radial graph, for those of you guys who can't see it. And it shows all the different aspects of an athlete and what goes into it. It's got mental performance, flexibility, mobility, technical skills, tactical skills, aerobic fitness, anaerobic fitness, power, agility, strength, self-discipline, quickness. And you can start to see what areas an athlete needs to develop. And that's going to change over time. I recently showed this graph to the largest soccer club, the directors of the largest soccer club in Michigan. And I was explaining to them that what their model is all about just teaching soccer. But they're not developing athletes. And I proposed to them, why don't you let us come in and educate your staff on how to insert some athlete development skill workouts and programs into their soccer programs. Because what I realized is, we are not going to change the model of youth sports in America right now. There's too much money. There's too many people that have jobs. We can no longer go out and just complain and say, youth sports, it's a mess. Have you guys heard this? I mean, how many times do you hear or read articles about youth sports is out of control, it's this and that, it's this and that. But who's doing something about it? That meeting I had with this soccer group really made me feel like, hey, we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to make a change from within what is already existing. Because what they said to me was this. They said, Jim, you can stop talking. We get it. We agree with you 100%. We know we're not developing athletes. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to coordinate all this. So what I'm proposing to you is that we need to go beyond just training. We need you, the people in this room, to be great. To be great coaches, but even more importantly, we need to be great communicators, educators, and I think most importantly, coordinators. We need to coordinate the athlete development efforts of people who, they want it to happen, they don't understand the big picture. They are stuck in a world of, we have to win games this weekend or we're going to get bumped down a tier. We have to win games so that when tryouts come in the fall or in the winter or in the summer, people come to our club and pay us money so that we have jobs. Do they want to develop athletes? Yes. They tell me to my face, we want to do this. But all we can focus on is right now and winning these games. But we can go out and help them see the bigger picture. Because after I proposed this, one of the coaches said to me, you know what, Jim? I totally get this. Because my daughter plays in the club, and she's not the best player on the team, and her coach has let her know that. And she is thinking about quitting. And I asked her what age group she was in. U8. That coach needs somebody like us to come in and explain that developing the athlete, teaching them how to run and move and be flexible, and also have fun at the same time they're learning how to play soccer, is going to help that athlete play the next year. Because at that level, really the #1 goal should be get the athlete to play the next year. And then the next year. Because this shouldn't be a game of attrition. We shouldn't be just trying to get rid of athletes by them quitting. It should be not deselecting, it should be allowing everybody to develop and see where it takes them. So we need to be great. That's why we do all this training and talk about things and have these products, is so that we can be the best versions of ourselves and go out and communicate with these coaches. Sometimes that's hard though. And I wanted to tell you a story about this guy, Kyle VandenBosch, who Jason knows quite well. In 2010, he got signed to the Detroit Lions. If you can't see it, Kyle VandenBosch is the bald white guy that wore the red contacts that was really, really scary looking. But he was a great person. And he was signed to the Lions because 2 years prior to that, they had the 0-16 season. Worst record, I mean, they lost every single game. The year after, I think they only won 2 games. And when the new coach came in, Jim Schwartz, he knew that there was a cultural problem. He signed Kyle VandenBosch to be part of the team, not just because he's a great player, but because he knew that he would bring something to the table different. On the first day of practice, Kyle VandenBosch, after a pass, he played defensive end. So he wasn't out there, running around like, that's not what they do. First pass was like a 50-yard pass down the field to Calvin Johnson, and Kyle VandenBosch ran 50 yards down the field and smacked Calvin on the back Like here I am, I made that play. And people looked around and they're like, what is this guy doing? The next play, he was running sideline to sideline, and every play he ran and finished it all the way. All the other D linemen were looking around like, what is this guy trying to prove? And at the end of the day, they were like, okay, cool, there you go. You made your statement on the first day of practice. That's done now. Second day, he was doing the same thing, running all over the place, working his butt off, doing stuff that nobody else was doing. And before you knew it, Cliff Averill, he's the one that told me the story, and he went on and won a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. Cliff Averill said, you know what? I'm not going to look bad. This guy's doing this. This is what we should be doing. And he started chasing people up and down the field. Well, now you got that guy going, and then another guy came in, and another guy. And before you knew it, the entire defense on every single play in practice for an NFL team, this doesn't happen that much, was running all over the place, trying to be the first one there to touch the guy. A lot of the guys on that team attribute a huge cultural shift to one man single-handedly changing that by presenting what they should be doing. In that story, I tell that story to a lot of kids because that's kind of the power that one person can have in making a change. And that's the power that we can have. We can be that Kyle VandenBosch. We can be running around making plays. But more importantly, I tell a lot of kids, in that story, who's the other hero in that story? It's not just Kyle. It's Cliff Averill. Because Cliff Averill recognized that something was important and needed to be done. And instead of worrying about him and his own ego, he looked at somebody and said, that's the right thing to do. Let's go. And that got a lot of other people involved and got a lot of other things started. So what I'm proposing to you is, be a great coach. Be a great communicator. Be a coordinator. And take what you learned this weekend and don't just put it in a silo of the kids that you interact with. Go out and start spreading this in the community. Sometimes you may have to volunteer your time and have meetings with coaches to explain things to them. But the rewards are going to be there. You will figure out how to make a career of that, because when you understand how to do this, people will realize that that's special and nobody else is doing that. And to me, we are the ones. We are the people that can make this happen. And we have to do it. We have a responsibility. And I think by the end of this weekend, did this just go up? Sorry about that. I think by the end of this weekend, you're going to feel like you are better. If you don't feel great right now, I think you're going to feel a little bit better at the end of this weekend. And I think you're going to be able to take everything that you're going to learn this weekend and hopefully be able to go out there and make a difference in a lot of people's lives. Thank you.